Live.
Hi, it's David Limbrick.
And Tim Gulty.
And we're your Victorian Liberal Democrats team. And we thought we'd just do a quick catch up on what's happened in Parliament this week. The government's been sort of avoiding lots of controversial legislation, but there was one bit of legislation that we did find controversial this week. Tim, tell us about it.
So the government made some amendments to the Public Health and Wellbeing Act, and we probably all remember that from last year and all the fighting we had over the state of emergency. This is actually where they get their pandemic powers from. Anyway, this was omnibus thing with a whole bunch of little changes stuffed in, but one of them was to grant the Cho statutory immunity from prosecution for anything he'd done in his role, which we thought was quite extraordinary. You may remember we had a private members bill last year where we were planning to hold decision makers, including the Cho, accountable for what they've done during the pandemic orders, and if they were not, if their orders were not the proportionate and the least restrictive of rights, so they could actually, and they'd done that recklessly, they could actually be prosecuted and jailed. That was the bill. The bill got stuck in committee, and it's not going to come out again, and the government's changed the rules anyway, so it's less relevant now, so that's not going to happen. But for the government to actually step up and give the Cho immunity was extraordinary. And what was even more extraordinary was almost every MP in the upper house voted in favour of that. I was shocked. It was just David, me and Catherine who voted against it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So anyway, we weren't happy about that, so we voted against that. There was also another amendment on a bill that did pass. The government got defeated on an amendment that was going to, effectively it was about fines. So if people get a fine from a toll road operator for not paying a bill, normally the police collect that, which is quite unusual in itself that the police is collecting for a private company, but that's a whole other issue. But the government is allowing people in hardship circumstances for the police to withdraw that, and that's a good thing. We supported that. But one of the things that the crossbench wanted to do, and this was brought up by Rod Barton, was to remove police discretion, because there was apparently a possibility of a situation where a toll road operator would withdraw the fine, but the police might choose not to withdraw it. So that seemed a bit odd, and actually it passed. So that was quite good. That was a good little win.
More unusual for the fact that the government lost something in the upper house. We haven't seen much of that in the last 3.5 years, but since Adam and Kashalia quit the government banks, they've lost a couple of numbers, and it's much harder for them to pass stuff. So hopefully we'll see more of that in the future. What else was the government extended the pandemic declaration, obviously, for another 3 months. That doesn't necessarily mean we'll have mandates and so on for another 3 months. They might back it off earlier. We've seen other states around the country starting to pull them down, but Victoria's not telling us anything, and they've just granted themselves the powers to keep going for another 3 months.
Yeah, and I think there was a bit of confusion in the media, and I've had some people contact me as well. The pandemic declaration just gives them the power to issue the orders. So the actual orders and the declaration are two separate things. So one is like saying, okay, in the current environment, you can issue emergency pandemic orders, but just because they have the declaration doesn't mean that they won't change the orders. So they're two different things, and the media was a bit confused about that as well in some reporting I saw. But that brings us to another thing. If you've been following us, you would know that we successfully passed a referral, a motion in February, requesting that IPMAC, which is the Independent Pandemic Management Advisory Committee, to look at the issue of general worker mandates and open premises directions. So this is about vaccine mandates and passports, effectively, for general workers and pubs and shops and libraries and all that sort of stuff. So we were sort of wondering what was going on with that. We didn't get any response. And then finally we got a response last week saying that they've had a meeting and they're going to be considering it. So that's good. But what I requested this week from the Health Minister in Parliament is to, publish all the minutes of IPMAC meetings, publish their terms of reference, publish a schedule of when they're going to meet, because it seems like this IPMAC is just totally opaque at the moment. No one knows, what they're doing, when they're meeting, what they're talking about, any of this sort of stuff. And I think that, if the objective as the government said, was for this group to be, independent and some sort of, watchdog for what's happening with the powers, then, the public should at least know what they're doing, right? I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me, but...
I'm shocked and astounded, or kind of, not really, that they took 3 months to meet, or 4 months to meet after we passed the legislation, when this urgent stuff is going on, and it's their job to check it, and oh yeah, we got around to having a meeting now and talked about what we should be doing, maybe, and we'll get back to it in another couple of months, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, the sense of urgency from our point of view, like this is absolutely critical and urgent issue, right? Affecting hundreds of thousands of Victorians. So, why you would, drag your heels on something like this. I mean, I would have thought that this is, top priority, right? But anyway, the other thing that I requested in Parliament this week is, and I sent it to the Premier because it's actually not quite clear who actually decides this, but there's caps on unvaxxed travellers returning to Victoria, and we would like those caps removed or at least lifted. I mean, we've heard enough of these stories about people, Australian citizens getting stranded overseas, can't come back home and see their families and stuff. There's still people like that out there. We don't want to have any more of these caps. It's just crazy. So we want them to come home and see their families. So yeah, I requested that. And the other thing that I'll post it probably later today, a question to the Small Business Minister was around vaccine passport entry requirements for small businesses, because there's going to be a lot of tourists for the first time in a long time in Victoria because of the Grand Prix. And the advice to businesses is that you can accept a vaccine certificate from any foreign country, right? And, as long as it's like a government issued certificate. And we were thinking, well, how is a business meant to know if it's actually a legit certificate or not? In lots of cases, the certificate might not even be in English. If they're coming from, China or another country that doesn't speak English, how is the business meant to know? And it's quite concerning that the business, might be worried about getting a fine and end up, refusing customers and stuff. And that's not going to be a good travel experience to Melbourne, is it?
How are they going to know who's a foreigner and who's not? I mean, sometimes it might be obvious, but sometimes it's not.
Yeah, and like people in the chamber were heckling me when I was talking about this because they were saying, oh, well, all tourists need to be vaxxed to come here. But I was like, well, how are they going to know if they're a tourist or not? I mean, are they just going to look at them and know that they're a tourist? I mean, you can't tell if someone's a tourist or not just by looking at them. You've got no idea. I mean, we have lots of people who speak English as a second language who live in Melbourne. My wife included, right? And your wife included. So, you're not going to know if someone's a tourist or not. That's just silly.
My wife doesn't live in Melbourne.
Oh, well, not in Melbourne. Yes, up north. But yeah, in Victoria.
We also asked the usual questions about repealing the mandates, ending the state of emergency. We talked about the mandatory isolation rules if you're a close contact and how they're stupid and how it's damaging schools and education with classes, teachers being cancelled. I talked about the Wombat State Forest and how a vast amount of timber was knocked down in the storm last year. And it's now making a huge fire risk, and they want to get that timber out and use it in timber mills, which have a massive shortage right now because of the lawfare by green activist groups have shut down logging over the summer, and now all that timber mills about to close. So there's all this timber lying on the ground that needs to be cleared urgently before it becomes a massive fire risk. And that timber could be used to keep the mills running. Wombat State Forest was supposedly handed back over to the Indigenous owners. And they have the rights to the timber, but the government's not letting them harvest that, even though they want to, because we handed over ownership, but you don't actually do what you want there. We'll tell you what you do on your land, So we talked about that. I also talked about the Bundalong Lagoon and how it's filling up with weeds and silting up because they stuffed up the water flow into it. That's a little local issue we discovered last week when we were out there. So a normal week in Parliament, almost.
Yeah, well, there was something very unusual and abnormal this week. It may be that this week is my last week in Parliament. You should all know that I'm actually running as the lead Senate candidate in the upcoming federal election. And one of the restrictions under the Commonwealth law is that you can't run as a candidate, or you can't be nominated for an election while you're a sitting member of state parliament. So in order to do that, I will need to resign. I'll probably be doing that sometime next week, I guess. But we'll have to wait and see when the election's actually called, but hopefully that will be very, very soon. So that's going to be pretty amazing. Once I do that, I'm going to be focusing on, campaigning for the federal election with, my Senate ticket colleagues, Crystal Mitchell and Carolyn White, and I've been going around to lots of events on the weekends with lots of our lower house candidates. If you'd like to help out with all that, one of the things that you could do if you want to do, and I'll put a link in the comments to an email address to contact, is you can get a call flute. So a call flute is just like a sign. You can put it on your fence. You can put it in your business if you happen to be a small business owner. And we've got thousands of these going up all over the state. It really does help because you've got, especially if you live on a busy road, you've got thousands of cars going past every day. But even if it's a quiet street, it's like a really great way to show your support for the party and for me and for our other lower house candidates. So if you're willing to do that, I'll put a comment in the live stream here so you can have a look, and I'll probably post something about it a bit later today as well. But look, I've had so many people wish me well in what we're trying to do here. I know Tim's wishing me well. I made a bit of a joke in Parliament that all the Labor MPs in Parliament that hate me should vote for me so they can get rid of me and I won't come back again. They thought that was funny. A couple of them actually joked that they might vote for me because of that. So maybe they will. Maybe I'll get a couple of extra votes that way. So anyway, that's interesting. But we're going to be doing a lot more work on that over the next month or so.
Yeah. So, and it's a little bit sad, and Dave will be gone, and it'll be me here all by myself for Parliament's going to be not sitting for the next 5 weeks or so, but then there'll be a few weeks of sitting where David's missing, and we're not replaced, and it'll be just me. So probably everyone's dreading that. The Labor will be no one to restrain me. I'll be running rampant and wild. Anyway, so it's a bit sad.
You're saying I restrain you, Tim?
David keeps me grounded.
All right, yeah. We're like yin and yang, and we've got yang going off all by itself now. So yeah.
So this whole week was a bit of this will be the last time. Last time you have dinner in the dining room. Last time you have a.
Well, you can always invite me back.
Last time you drink all my wine.
Yep. Yeah. So there was a bit of that as well, but I'm just having a look here. In the comments, I'm just trying to see. Sorry if I don't get to your question. There's a lot of people saying drop the mandates. Well, I agree with that, of course. Also, we've got a question coming here. Yeah. So, all right. So we've got a couple of things. Someone's asked about how can I volunteer in Wodonga? There you go, Tim.
Just contact me, my office. We're getting a list of people up there. Talk to Dean in my office, who's allowed to do that kind of thing, and we'll get you involved.
Yep. And there's a question here: is there anything like a vote of no confidence in Australia? Well, there is, but they only usually work if the government members support the vote of no confidence. But what we're proposing as a policy in our Freedom Manifesto at the federal election is something called recall elections. Now, this is not something particularly radical. They have this in many jurisdictions in the world. Many US states have it. In fact, California recently had a recall election. Germany has it. I think some other countries have it as well. Effectively, what it is if there's a member of parliament or a government that the people decide, halfway through an election cycle that they don't like them, they can set up some sort of petition. If the petition gets big enough, then they'll have an election to recall the government and ask for a new government. Now, in the case in California recently, I think that actually failed and they didn't recall the governor. But I think it's a really good mechanism, not so much for the times that it works, but but that anyone in government knows that if they go a bit too far, it's always an option that's there. And I think it's been working quite well in Germany. So that's one of our policies. So recall elections. Have a look into it. If you go to ldp.org.au/freedom, you can read all about how that works.
We should point out that when David resigns, the Lib Dems still keep the spot, and we get to replace David at some point. Either if David doesn't get I think he's going to go to the Senate, but if he doesn't, we'll bring him back. But if he does, we'll replace him with somebody else. So there will be 2 Lib Dems back in the Victorian upper house again.
Yeah.
It'll just be a short period without.
And then hopefully in November there'll be more. So, and after the federal election, we're going to be focusing on, pivoting towards the state election. You may see some of the candidates that are running for the federal election may put their hand up to run in the state election. We'll wait and see what happens there, but none of that's been chosen or sorted out or anything yet. We're still focusing on the federal election at the moment. But we will soon, probably, soon after it's the federal election's finished, probably in June or something, we'll start looking at the state election and what we're going to do there. So that'll be a really exciting thing later in the year. Yeah, so I think that's all from us today. You probably won't see another one of these live streams in Parliament with Tim and I, unless Tim invites me in as a guest.
We might do a split screen Canberra, Melbourne.
Yeah, we could do one of those. If anyone's following me in from New South Wales, I'm actually flying up to Sydney tomorrow. I'm very excited about going on a plane for the first time in years, I think. The last time I went on a plane was to Perth in 2020. That's a long time ago. So I'm going to help John Ruddock. He's our lead Senate candidate in New South Wales. I'm going up to his launch event. They've kindly invited me up to speak at his event. That's going to be at the Art House Hotel in Sydney CBD from 4 p.m. tomorrow. So if you want to catch up, I'd love to meet you there. Please turn up if you're from Sydney.
If you missed the news today, Lib Dems actually now have a sitting senator.
Yes, that's very big news. Senator Sam McMahon, formerly of the Country Liberal Party.
In the Northern Territory?
Yep, in the Northern Territory. She resigned from the Country Liberal Party back in January, I think it was. And she's decided to join the Liberal Democrats and run for the Senate in Northern Territory, which is wonderful news. We've got a sitting senator now, but also we've got a great candidate in Northern Territory. For those that might know Sam, she's been doing some great stuff. She's highly supportive of legalisation of nuclear. She was a big critic of the Northern Territory's crazy COVID response. She's been opposing vaccine mandates, lots of other things. So she's really pro-freedom. I think she's a great addition to our party, and I really look forward to meeting her.
It'll be an uphill battle for her to keep the seat, but let's fight that fight.
Yeah. So I think it's wonderful news. So best of luck to her, and I'll be doing whatever I can to help her out.
All right.
We'll see you all soon.